Right, yeah, let's just confirm what we're going to do. The signal is coming in on all these 4 DACs, and the only DAC that's not producing a signal is this DAC here. There's no output on this signal here into this op amp. Now, I initially thought that when I swapped the DAC to this position here, these DACs are the same, there was no signal on this point here, which would suggest that either it's the op amp or there was a short on the output of the op amp. Well, that's not the case. What it actually is it is the DAC. We swapped the DACs over, and the fault moves with the DAC, so that's clearly the problem. As I say, all the signals were on the line, so that's a proof that there's not a break in the track to any of these DACs. It's definitely the DACs causing the problem. And as I say, when I squirted it with freezer, it seemed to be around this area that the thing packed up and stopped working. So I think the thing to do is I'm waiting for the DAC to arrive, and that should be in the next couple of days. And we found the equivalent for the DAC, which is great. I went on the EEV blog and gave them the code number and asked if anyone knew where I could possibly get one. But they also asked me for the schematic. You know, this basically, I did a screen dump of this page here so they could see the pinouts. And someone suggested, and I think it's an AD566. I'll confirm that. But they suggested AD566. Well, I'll confirm it if it's, or correct it if it's wrong. But I think it's an AD566. So anyway, I managed to find an AD566 that looked identical to the chip that came out. It was like a bronzy coloured, goldy coloured, same sort of layout. It had the same sort of, like, there was like a square panel over the chip, a ceramic chip with a gold, like a gold window, but it also had like a gold line pointing to pin 1, and it was exactly the same, looked identical apart from the numbers. So I managed to get one a reasonable price on eBay from a UK seller who had quite a few of them, and hopefully when it turns up we'll plug it in and try it. So that's what we're doing now. We're going to wait and wait for the chip to turn up, and I'll get it installed in the unit, I think, and see if it works. Okay, the chip arrived yesterday and I've installed it this evening, so we're going to power it up and see if it works. Now hopefully this will be the cure, and we should have our display back. So let's just cross our fingers and hope it works. So I'm switching it on. Oh, looks promising. And our display back. That's excellent. So yeah, it was the DAC, which what I initially thought it was. So that's good. The next thing will be to get it mounted properly in the unit, and we'll go from there and power it up and see how it works. Okay, got the 1345A display unit back in the 3562, and hopefully this will be fixed now. This has been a bit of a problem child, this signal analyzer. For those who are not aware of what happened with this, I know I've got quite a few new subscribers recently. This is a piece of gear that someone in Reading was offering for collection. He texted me and said, "I got this audio analyzer. Were you interested in it?" And of course, I said yes, and went and picked it up. This was about 2 years ago. And it was in a bit of a state. He said it had been sitting around in someone's garage, and it was quite clearly been in the damp. There's no rust inside it, but you could tell that it sort of smelled a bit mildewy. The front BNC on channel 2 was broken off, and it didn't work. You can go back and look at my other videos if you want to see what else I did with it. So we bought various boards and spent a lot of time fault finding it, and it's been working fine for the last 6 months, 8 months. It hasn't been a problem. And then it developed this intermittent, well, first of all it developed this problem on the channel 2, which is better, but it's still got a bit of a problem where it develops a high offset on channel 2, and if it gets too bad the thing won't actually pass the calibration process. Now we fixed that by changing a couple of transistors, but it still seems to have much higher offset than channel 1, and I basically replaced everything that I can think of that could be a problem. The op amps have been replaced. There's a couple of matched pair transistors I've also changed. It's okay if it's been on for 20 minutes or so. It's fine, and there's no offset. But you'll probably notice it when I first switch it on. You'll see that when it's finished its boot process, this green light will be on, which means that there's a high offset, and I will show you that briefly. So the display's back in, as I say. We replaced the DAC on the display that failed. What was happening was the display was flickering, and it got worse and worse and worse, and I sort of sprayed some freezer on some of the chips, and the thing totally went haywire, and we just had a load of sort of vertical lines. First of all, I thought it was a DAC, and I replaced it with a DAC I thought was the correct one, and it wasn't the correct DAC, and that threw me off a bit. I was thinking, oh, it's not the DAC, it must be the op amps connected to it. Changed the op amp, no change. So then I went back to look at this DAC again, because then I realised that when I moved the DAC to another position, the fault went with that DAC. So I'm thinking, well, it's got to be the DAC, because there's 4 DACs in here exactly the same, and if you move it, the fault moves with the DAC. Plugged this, bought another DAC, managed to find it's an AD566, which was great because the EEV blog forum helped me out there. They're great. If you've ever got any problems with electronic gear, go to the EEV blog forum. There's some really helpful blokes on there. We tried to cross-reference the number, the HP part number, and that was no luck at all with that. So what we did in the end was I uploaded the schematic and what the chip looked like. The internal layout of it, in the schematics it shows the inside of the chip and how the DAC's laid out. And someone suggested a 566, and I found some on eBay from a UK seller. I know I've gone through this before, and the chips looked identical, exactly the same. I haven't actually got one here. I think I threw it away, so I didn't make sure I didn't put it back in another unit. Apart from the obviously the number was different. The HP numbers are one, it's a 4-digit number followed by a slash and another 4-digit number, whereas this was an AD566 ADW or something. I can't remember exactly the last 3 letters of the code. Anyway, I plugged it in and it worked straight away. I did a few other things. I adjusted the couple of the calibration processes of the display, and that's actually brought the intensity of the screen back up, and that's not down to actually as I said earlier, I know I'm probably repeating myself, to the drive of the display. It's to do with the write speed of the vector engine. We've adjusted that. There's a calibration mode when it shows the Pikes Peak. You've probably seen that Pikes Peak and the sort of like the mountain layout, and there's some vertical lines down here, and one of those is the write speed, and there should be 7 dashes on the horizontal line, sorry. And those horizontal lines should have 7 dashes, and they had about, I think it was about 8 or 9. I've adjusted that down to 7, and that's really noticeably brought the intensity up. So let's power it up and just let it run through its power on self test. So basically now it's switching on, and now it's going to run through it, start loading the information from its ROM into the RAM, and this is the boot process, and you can see the display is working fine. It's pretty clear and sharp. It's not the best CRT in the world, it's nowhere near as good as the spectrum analyzer above it, but it's pretty good, and it's got a lot of, you turn it up, it's pretty bright actually, much better than it was before. So let's let that finish, and then you'll see that it's working fine. I've also had to replace actually the backup battery. I mean, this thing's had so many little faults with it, but one of the other problems was the backup battery had failed. I replaced that, and within a year the backup battery failed again. So I took the thing apart. This is on the CPU board, and checked the voltage and the current draw, and it was drawing about like 3.5 milliamps, which is far too much for a backup battery. It should be microamps. And I went over with a couple of can of freezer, and there was a chip that I found that looked like it was drawing too much current, and it was like a 74LS10 or something like that. It was one of the sort of like the generic chips, So I replaced that, and it seemed to have dropped the level back, so it seems to be okay now. Now, I was talking about this DC offset problem. You can see the display is perfectly okay. The DC offset problem, I think, is still a bit of a problem. It's been warm in the workshop today, so it might not show up, but you can call the DC offset calibration process up, and I'll just zoom in a bit so you can see what I'm doing. To check the front end calibration, you just go special function, and then we call service test, then we do test input and front end adjusts. Now, and it's offset adjustment. It's pretty good here. You see this right hand and this left hand channel, they should be around 0, and it's fine because the unit's warm. It's fine. That will drop out of there, come out of calibration mode in a second. There you go, it's out of calibration mode. So the unit is clearly working and it's calibrated perfectly. There's no error message or anything, but when the unit's cold, it will fail calibration on the right hand channel but not on the left, or channel 2 and not in channel 1. And I still can't really work out why that is. I checked all the tantalum capacitors, none of them are leaky, they're at the low ESR. I've basically more or less changed all the chips bar a couple of logic chips, and I really can't see it's those. I've changed a couple of matched pair transistors that looked like one of them had been replaced at some point, and I was a bit dubious about, and replaced it for the correct part number, or the cross-reference of the part number, because the part that had been fitted was not the correct part. Changed that, and that seems to have improved it a lot, but I've still got this slight imbalance, and I'm wondering if it's what it is it's like a matched pair transistor, but these transistors are in one can, 2 transistors in one can, and there's 2 of them, and I'm wondering if they are like selected for the gain, so the two double transistors are selected for gain, and if they're slightly wrong, it causes the amplifier to move up and down, and that would make sense actually if they're not perfectly matched. There's just like because it's a balanced amplifier, if one is not exactly right, it's going to pull it one way. But at the end of the day, the display is working. I nearly ran out of patience with this thing. It's only because I don't want it to get the better of me. I can't, as I say, can't take this sort of thing up the tip. I haven't got the heart to take a piece of equipment like that up the tip. So I need to try and keep these things going as long as I have the patience and the will and tenacity to do it. Anyway, a bit of a ramble video, but you can see it's all working fine. Display is nice and sharp. Hopefully it will stay working for a bit longer than 6 months. I know there are not many videos come up recently, but I hope to put a few more videos up in the next couple of months. Thanks for watching.